And the reason why I choose 10,000, not because it's a round number, not because it's a forecast, because it's the number of AI agents that our colleagues in the group are creating, and this is going to be the number that are going to be used in the next few months. This month is about 6,000, but that grows exponentially. These are all tools that people use to make their work better in many different ways, and I'd like to share what we learned in the journey in the last year and a half, more or less. First, as a context, Prosus is a technology firm. We work on e-commerce, and because of the volume of transactions, we serve about 2 billion users globally. We already use machine learning in every form of shape for many years. At this size, it's just impossible not to work with prediction systems. You switch them off, the companies do not work. So there's already a lot of work there. But what we focus on now on changing the entire platform for e-commerce, and we use AI agents and large commerce models, which is large language models that understand intent, they understand commerce, and so on. So that's one big part of what we do. And the other big part of what we do is we use these tools to make our workers better, faster in many dimensions, and that's what I'm going to focus today. So the baseline is about 30,000 colleagues across the globe that use these tools. Just to take away, just joined the Prosus ecosystem last week. So some of the brands that you probably know. When I say agents, what do I mean? I mean something that it's a shift, it's an evolution of AI assistants. So AI assistants, we all use them, they're occasionally helpful and so on, but not much, right? We all have that same experience. AI agents in our work complete jobs to be done. Pieces of workflow that you can automate, you can delegate to these agents. So you will see, at least the way we see, is that every one of our colleagues will have a fleet of these agents. He or she can pick every day and use them. This is the 10,000s. Who's producing them? They produce them. They create them, our colleagues. What do we measure? 4 things. Productivity, it's obvious. That's fine. But it's not the most important most of the time. Quality of the output, it's important, equally important. But organizationally, it's also independence and agility. So how much can you do, which is beyond what your immediate scope of competencies, and how much can you do it without needing others? These are all factors that you need. So just to land this into something practical, here is an example of an agentic workflow, and it is an interaction between the shop, it can be a restaurant, it can be a vendor, it can be anything, an account manager for that shop. And the shop wants to know details about a recent sales hiccup, right? They sell on our platform, they want to know, hey, last week I had a trip, so what happened? So in a normal situation, the shop would contact the account manager would ask some data analysts in the group, find me out the data about all this. It might be immediate, might take some time, and then you have the answer back. This is the agentic workflow, where the question is passed on in whatever channels you have to the first agent, which is an AI account manager. This agent figures out it's a question about data, it's a question about this vendor here, and passes it on to another agent, in this case an AI data analyst. The data analyst knows how to get the data for answering this question, pass it back, and then gives the answer to the shop and an update to the account manager, right? So in this case, you got 2 agents that operate. In this case, it could be 1, it can be many more. So this is the idea of agentic workforce, in which humans and these tools, which are specialized in something, work together to achieve a specific goal. So by the way, these are 2 of the 10,000s. We started the journey a while back, and we developed our own tools for this because we couldn't find them in the market. We have a large engineering team, so we can do that. And we started back in 2019, when it was really early. We released that tool. It's called Tokan, by the way. It's only internal, so I'm not selling anything to you. Released to every Prosus employee. And then we made that tool agentic in 2024, The main reason is to reduce hallucinations, but the second most important one is that you can talk to the database, to the knowledge bases of the organization, right? Otherwise, these assistants are borderline useless, right? And then with that, we release tools such a way that every of our colleagues can build the agents themselves. Early on, we concluded that this process cannot be top-down, it has to be bottom-up. There's too much to experiment. There are too many things which are new for everybody. It's impossible for each one of us to understand which are the workflows that need automation. Everybody in the organization is better suited for doing that. So all of you are better suited to figure out what matters for you. I'm not, right? So that's the idea. We look at this in a very specific way. So there are a certain number of workflows for which there is a high density of skills, a high density of people that actually work in that area in the market. Coding is one. Coding is similar in most organizations. And there's a large, actually long, tail of jobs to be done which are really unique for you. So there's going to be perhaps jobs that only one person has that need, maybe 10. This is incredibly long. So for this long tail, we use our own tools. We don't find anything in the market because they connect to our databases, they need specific integrations and so on. While for these, we buy from the marketplace. For instance, in coding, you have the usual suspects. Cursor is used by 90% of our developers. And that's more or less the way it works. Now, what's the situation at this moment? This is a snapshot in September. These are all the agents that are in operation. It means that are used at least once per week. If it's not used once per week, it's not in this diagram, right? So the total is about 6,000. And you can see a certain pattern here. We launched them back in December. People started adopting, there's a plateau, and then they started getting exponential. Come back to that in a second. First, you can also see a classification. We talk about these agents in terms of interns, juniors, intermediate, and senior. Come back to that, what that means in a second. But first, this plateau. So the premise of what we do is that we create tools that enable everybody to connect to their knowledge bases, to figure out how to connect to your database, your email, to your WhatsApp, anything that you use, we give them the possibility of connecting, stitching it together into an agent that does something useful. This is what our colleagues asked us to do, which we did. And then they didn't use it. Right? This is the first interesting thing that we learned, is that it seems extremely complicated for everybody. And when we talk about agentic workforce, everybody sort of thought this is something for the engineers. So we need education, skills, and so on for doing that. What happened here is that we started going to the companies in our group, and we started getting the people from marketing, from sales, HR, legal, and so on, and working with them. And it was very simple sessions, but looking at, this is part of your workflow, why don't you automate that? It's super complex. No, it's not. It's really complex. We do it in 10 minutes together with you, right? Sit together with them, we do it. They become the ambassadors, and they go to the other colleagues, and so on, and so on, and so on. So this is what happened around May, June this year, and then it started growing very fast. So the barrier is perceived is not there. It's a barrier of, you assume they are complex because the name is complex, but it's not the case. The interns for us are agents that work with documents, so they can't make big mistakes, right? So that's very simple. Juniors can go and get data from databases, so they have credentials. Credential for databases, credential for knowledge bases, whatever credentials you have. Intermediates, and then it gets interesting, then can add their own content to these knowledge bases. So they can alter the knowledge base of your organization. Right? And the seniors are the ones that orchestrate agents. So obviously, what you really want is to move all this towards that. And in fact, it is sort of happening here. You can see that over time, there were very few intermediate and seniors, or mostly juniors, and now you can see that growing. So this is what you want, because there's a fairly obvious association between seniority of these agents and value that they deliver. They are useful only if you can connect to all these, let's say, knowledge bases or tools and so on. By the way, this is a general list, but this is exactly what was a barrier in the past. If they're not connected, they're not really useful. So each one of these agents can potentially access each one of these, but it depends on the credentials, on the, let's say, the access rights that the user has. And that's done by the user. The user has certain access rights, therefore the agent of the user has those access rights. That's how it is controlled. Give you an example of 3 agents, 3 of these 6,000. The one on the left, it is a senior executive. It's a senior agent. We call it the restaurant account executive. It's exactly the one that we showed before. It is used by the account managers, in this case in iFood in Brazil, and it's used every Monday to create all the information about our partners, our restaurants, and instead of doing this manually, there's an agent that produces all this for them. It goes into the database, creates the status, and then provides information so they can go out in the field, they can inform the restaurant about their performance. It's used by about 200 of our associates, and it does the work of about 10 FTEs, give or take. And this is something that they estimate, right? So it's not my estimate, they estimate. That's the reason why they use it. The estimates of what it means is something that comes from the users. So we monitor usage, but the value comes from them. The next one, it's an intermediate agent, which is a data analyst. It's very commonly used because what it does, it looks into data in English. So you interrogate data in your natural language. You don't need to know SQL or anything, or you definitely don't need to know how to code. So if you know how to talk, you can get the data that you need. So we eliminate barriers for those that need data to access to the data that they need to work. It's less complex than the other one. It's exactly just one work stream, and it's used by about thousands of associates, and it's actually used also by some agents, right? As I showed in the previous diagram. So thousands of associates use it, and some agents do. This here is the newsletter wizard. It's a junior agent, and it's used by me. So just to give you an example of how easy it is to do these kind of things, I subscribe to all the newsletters about AI that I can find, right? It is my job, therefore I need to stay up to date. Side effect, I can't read them all. It's impossible, I just read one or two and so on. So I create this agent, which kicks in every Saturday morning. What it does, it goes into my email, picks up all the newsletters, browses their content. It doesn't give me summaries, but I don't care about short, high-level information. It's useless. Right? What I really need is deep, specific information for the things I care about. So it's instructed to look at all the newsletters and to pick the topics that are present in most of them. That's a vote of importance, and it picks those topics and puts them on top of my report. Then it looks at outliers, things that I care, but they are reported by one or two newsletters, not by the others. Right? It might be something that, it's interesting, but it's not yet mainstream. And then I instructed it to look at specific topics that I care about all the time. Reinforcement learning, memory in agents, and all that, and find out research that appears in these newsletters. It creates this summary, sends me a Slack on Saturday morning, stores in a document, and repeats next week, right? So, how many users does this agent have? At least one, and that's me. Of course, I share it with others, and others can use it, but it's just an example that these 6,000, 10,000 agents, the vast majority are going to be used by 1, 2, 10, 50 people. There are going to be a few in the fat tail there that are used by most of them, right? And who's the judge for what agents are important? You know how to work, you have the needs, I don't know that, right? So this is where we are at this moment. A few things that we learned in this process. I'm a technologist. I grew up in technology. I've been in this field for many years. But this is not a technical project. It's an organizational and cultural project. It has to do with getting familiar, comfortable with this kind of tools, accepting that the first time they do not work is not like Excel, right? It always works, you make mistakes. In this case, you both make mistakes. So the first time you create an agent, it doesn't really do what you want. Then you need to go to the next time until it does what you want. So you need to have a certain degree of openness to accept that. The other equally important, you don't need to be trained in technology. It works when I got the impression our organization works when our legal colleagues start coding, right? The legal colleagues start creating apps. That's a good sign. But also when the engineers start drafting their terms and conditions before going to the legal colleagues. That's also a good sign, right? They work outside of their domain. It's always under supervision, right? So you don't let these guys go around unsupervised, but that's the type of mechanics that we want. Bottom up, there's no way you can put this top down. Tools to everybody, the proper barriers to prevent big mistakes, safety, security and all that, but people have to experiment. You need to experiment to get used to that. So it is bottom up. Any success here is going to be bottom up. The data and the systems are not ready for what we want to do. Not mine, not yours, but that's not a barrier. The barrier is always the organization side. And finally, which is has to be part of this, is not the goal of an individual, it's a goal of everybody, which has an implication. In your bonuses, in my bonuses, in all our bonuses, there is a line that says, how many agents have you created, right? And that dictates part of your payment. So it is great to be bottom up, but it also be mandated in such a way that it actually happens. So this is what we have learned over time. We expect 10,000 to be reached around December. It doesn't really matter, right? It is what matters is the value. We estimate that the simplest way of measuring value here is just to measure time. It's not the most important, right? It's also not necessarily the most useful, but it is a way to measure. We estimate that these tools have created the equivalent of about 1,000 FTEs in our group out of 30,000 employees. So we get 1,000 additional workforce who just enter the organization because of these tools. And you see that in the performance of the organization. Before I close, just one thing that I'm really proud of I want to share. We launched last week AI House Amsterdam. It is a community space. It's a place where developers, people that work in AI, leaders and so on, get together. We are convinced that we are only successful if the ecosystem around us is successful, so we do the best we can to activate that ecosystem. It's non-commercial. It's a place where people meet, discuss about AI, discuss about the future, and hopefully get something nice out of that. With that, thank you for your attention.
Great, we already have some hands in the air, so if we get some microphones. Thanks very much for that, Euro. One here and one here. We get another microphone to this gentleman here. Raise, shake your hand like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. I was a little bit surprised by the number of the interns, especially after you described this is just document fetching agents. So is it really that you have so many different types of documents that it calls for that many different interns fetching the documents, or is it more a result of the KPI that you need to have many agents to get your bonus?
I don't think this happened before the KPI was out there. So this is really simple what people think is useful. I don't judge what's useful for people. I don't dictate what they do. If they do something that has, let's say, it looks at documents and extracts, compares them with other documents, they find it useful, great. It's just fine. So I'll tell you, we are smarter than that for our bonus, but that's another story.
Yes, over here.
Yes, your story strongly advocates for decentralized creation of agents, which makes perfect sense, of course. However, if a lot of your, for example, your more junior coworkers interact with customer data, it's important to have like security, compliance, governance metrics in place. Do you have any advice on possibilities to implement these governance metrics on a more centralized level, while still enabling the users to create their agents decentralized?
So, by the way, it is not free for all. So everything that we do has very strict privacy, security boundaries within people can operate. You can only touch the data for which you have, let's say, the possibilities, in which we have the protections. Before anything is released in production, it's audited. Right? So there's a lot of these things that are out there. So that means that, yes, you can make mistakes here, you have to have security, you have to be careful. You also need to experiment. You also need to make sure that you try this thing out. It's new for everybody, nobody really knows how to do it, and there's no other way to do it. The more we collectively learn from each other, experiment and share within the boundaries of security and privacy that you expect, the better off we are.
We have a question here in front.
Thank you very much. First of all, very interesting approach also. Thank you for that. You already answered one of my questions where you said that the people can create agents in their expertise area. So that's answered already, which would be a risk. So two questions are, how much of it is duplicate, you think, and how much of the duplication of effort in its creation are you tolerating? And the second thing is, how can you make sure that different agents with different contexts are running around, taking different actions on the same topic? So it's a bit of, isn't it a potential for inconsistency?
So first of all these agents are created by individuals and they are controlled by individuals. It's not that these agents are out there, they start in the morning and do what they want. Right? This is individuals that activate agents. Eventually, the moment that we are sure that they work well, that we consider them safe and reliable, they are going to go. And they will be there for doing their magic. Right? Now, no. Responsibility of this agent is always with the agent creator. It's a very clear line. So when we share the agents, it's not an agent with the agent, Tom Black of this company. So you know why it is done and so on. Of course, you have a lot of other risks, contamination, all these kind of things. And we capture that all the time. And by the way, we also reduce the number of things that we release before we are completely sure that it's not going to create this. Having said that, there's lots of duplication, that's perfectly fine. If it takes me 10 minutes to create an agent that makes me better, it takes you 10 minutes, the same agent, I don't care. It's still useful. So, but there's a lot of duplication for sure.
We have another question for the right beside you.
A question about financial benefit. Since you have been already developing agents for quite a while now, have you been able to collect some information about what you gained in this 1.5 years in terms of financial benefit? And the second question is about governing agents. You say that the individuals are responsible for agents, but what if the business outcome goes wrong? And what's the workaround? That is an old way, that you're switching to the old way, or what's the solution there?
So the first one, like I said before, there are many ways to measure let's call it return of investment of these agents. Right? We monitor everything, we measure everything, we interview people, we do A/B tests and all these kind of things. So the collective time, in terms of time, which is not the best way to measure things, but let's say we do that, it's around 1,000 equivalent FTEs for doing it without spending additional funds. So 1,000 FTEs appear in your organization. In our history, we started investing in machine learning and AI in 2018, and we keep investing significantly across. We estimate that on average, for every dollar or euro or whatever currency, every dollar we invest in AI, we have a return 2 and 4 times. So the question is, why don't we invest 10 times more? Because there's a limit to what the organization can absorb. So we're always pushing that. That's for sure.
Okay, just keep an eye on the time now. Did you answer the second question?
I don't remember the other
The
question.
second question was, what if things go wrong? Do you just go back to working the way you were? What's your workaround?
What if things go right? Right? It's amazing to listen. I mean, we go back to the old way. We make sure they don't go wrong, the responsibilities are clear, we go back and check and review. Things will go wrong. We know that. But why do we focus only on that? Right? Why don't we focus on the fact that this creates value? Right? We make our employees better. It gives you freedom. It makes you work in a different way. That's what really matters. And of course, you have to prevent mistakes. But I will never start preventing mistakes. Right? I'll go for a dream. The dream is that these organizations are going to be different. We are going to create different organizations that we think are better for us and for everybody. And that should be the focus. And yes, in between, we have to prevent errors and make sure that they do not cost.
Ladies and gentlemen, Euro Beinat!
Thank you.
A rare session where the questions were almost as good as the panel.